So one of the reasons why we've started this, we decided to do this big meeting is because we know that we're doing a lot of things on the action group, and there's a lot of information, but a lot of people miss the lives when we do a live stream. They miss them, or they have questions and they're not being answered to their satisfaction. Or you like a more personal approach. You want to hear it from real people. Some people have a hard time reading, doing a lot of reading. So hopefully we can demystify some of this bill for you. But I'm afraid with it being a bill in law, it is a very boring. I've got some slides and they are very boring because they are just about this bill to break it down to what, like in my opinion, I think are the most like bits that really we need to be aware of. Um, in making these slides, I haven't put every single detail because otherwise you might as well go and read the bill. If I put every detail, I've just tried to pull out bits that are relevant and how I think it's going to affect you, because this will affect every single home educator in this country. Uh, so it is, to me, very, very important to know what we're dealing with so we can also tell other people about it and we can understand what the issues are, because I know reading that bill is very hard. It like references across this way, that way, condition B, condition A, and then if this one's not fulfilled on section 4.3, whatever, and it's a little bit hard to track what they're actually talking about. So hopefully we simplify that a little bit for you. So this evening I am joined by Randall Hardy and Michelle Zaha and Jen Hodge as well, who all have a very good understanding of this bill and what it's going to mean. And I will be bringing them in to contribute where necessary, and they will also butt in if they need to. So that's also good. And hopefully keep an eye on the chat. Um, I will leave the poll running for a little while longer. I'm just having a look. Okay, so just the poll at the moment is showing that most people have read some of it. A few people have read all of it, and some people haven't read it. So we've got a little bit of a mix. Thoughts on the bill? Some people think it's about, the majority think it's a nasty bill and we need to scrap it. And there's somebody that thinks that it's a good thing. A few people have contacted their MPs or the Lords, and a lot of people haven't actually in this group. So is that? Hello, welcome. Come on in. There's a poll you can complete when you come in. We'll also can see, I've also got some indication of how many people have taken part in protests or petitions and that kind of thing. So it just gives me an idea. So there's a fair balance of everybody. So please feel free to type your questions in the chat as we go. And if we've got time, or if anyone, if you need to, at the end, if you need to go, you can go. But if you want to ask questions, I'm sure that the panel would be happy to help you out and answer those questions. So I'm going to share my screen to talk about the bill. There we go, full screen there. And as I said, these are going to be a little bit boring because it is, just legal stuff. And the wording is always very difficult, okay? Okay, so what does the bill say that we can't be concerned about? So one of the first things, which is not under the children not in school section, there's these sections near the beginning of the bill. Did you say it was clause 4, Randall? Clause 4, and then under clause 4 it'll say 16LA and 16LB, and this talks about the consistent identifiers. And what this is basically is they're saying that every child needs to be known by like one sort of identifying number or something like that, so that they can track and they can understand what's going on with the child. And like if I'm a social worker, I can just go and look up this number and I'll get all the other information I want. If I'm a doctor, I could go and look up this number and I'd get all the other information I want. So some people may think that's a good thing, but I've just got all the points here. So one part of this is that it talks about a designated person, and it also talks about This relates to the safeguarding or promoting the welfare of children. And the reason I've underlined this promoting the welfare of children is that it could be used for almost any reason under that sort of wording. It's not about significant harm, being at risk of significant harm. It's just about, well, I think this would be good for the child. And that could be a very subjective thing. So, Randall, I'm going to call on you just to talk a little bit about the designated person and the implications of that.
Okay, well, it's not quite going as far as the Scottish named person scheme did in 2014, which was deemed unlawful by the Supreme Court in 2016. But the real thing here is that this information about a child will be collected against a single identifying number, which will then get rid of some of the problems they experienced with this database, the ContactPoint database, because at that point they couldn't track people, because Jane Smith could have been down as John Smith or just J Smith or things like that, and it didn't work across different agencies to do it. So if you get rid of names and you give the child a number, then you get rid of ambiguity, and that's what they're wanting to do, so that when it comes to finding out what other services know about a child, and by that I mean social services, healthcare, and so on, as well as education, they'll know that they're always talking about the same child, and they'll also be able to track them. It's almost an ID card for children. It isn't clear. They're saying at the moment they'll lose it when they get to an adult. They may not do. But there's also a bill going through Parliament at the moment, the Data Use and Access Bill. It's in committee stage in the House of Commons after having been introduced in the House of Lords. And that will designate in one of the schedules any person under 18 as a vulnerable person, which will then mean that data controllers will have extra duties to make sure not to stop them sharing, but to encourage them to share information when they consider it's in the best interest of the child. So it's really a national register of all children. There's lots going on in the background, but data is already being shared when it shouldn't be. And if you connect this with the registers, that will be even more track and trace.
Now, if I play devil's advocate here, Randall, I could see how in some cases where it would be good for different agencies to be talking to each other about a child and all knowing what's going on with that child. But we do also know that sometimes that can be also expose a child, make a child vulnerable, if that information is shared indiscriminately and with the wrong people. So it can also put a child at risk as well. For instance, like with if somebody knows the child and they happen to work for the council and they can go look up that child's information and know stuff about them that should be confidential. There's a lot of ways in that having that kind of information could be have a negative impact for that family. But the main thing is, they want to give one number. Most adults would resist having all their information attached to like one number or one form of being identified. And just to say, some people say, oh, but you've already got national insurance numbers. National insurance numbers do not link to all your information, like your medical information and who you're married to, and
they can't be shared. They can't be shared.
And any trouble you've had in your life, that doesn't come up. You might have an NHS number, but that also only covers certain things. So it's keeping information kind of safe within a certain sphere. So I think most adults would resist being known by a number, or having a number, like being able to be tracked or surveilled. But I think by introducing it to children, it is something they can get through, and that could potentially, the child would have it into adulthood because the law could change by then as well. There's no guarantee that they would do away with it. Okay, so the next thing that we're concerned about is the section on children not in school, which is clause 30. And yeah, so we've got the main clauses in the bill that we are concerned with is clause 30 to, I think, what did we say, Randall, 35?
Something like that, yeah.
Something like that, yeah. And then there's little sections under it. So one of those would be 434A, local authority consent for withdrawal of certain children from school. These are what they mean by certain children. They've got to meet these two conditions. The one condition is that the child is either at a special school or in special educational provision at an independent school, or they have an individual development plan in Wales. Condition B is if their inquiry is being conducted under Section 47 of the Children Act 1989, or action is being taken under Section 47(8) of that act to safeguard or promote the child's welfare. So under these conditions, if your child is one of these, then they would need consent to be removed from school. Our issue, I think, is that just because inquiries are being conducted under Section 47 does not mean that the child is at risk of harm in their family home. It could mean a lot of other things. Okay. I see Randall's also linking some things in.
Just on data protection, Juliet, yeah. It's
okay,
fine.
good. Thank you. Okay, so these are the two areas where you would need local authority consent. I know there are some videos out there with people saying, oh, you will no longer be able to home educate your child. Or they say you will have to get permission from the local authority to home educate. It is not true unless you meet one of these conditions. Okay, so everything else remains the same for everyone else. Okay. Then we have 436B, which is the duty to register children not in school. So this is new because before, if your child, a child would only be known to the local authority if you were deregistering them from school or if they found out about them some other way. But there was no duty on a parent to register their children. And this one now puts that duty on a parent, and it says a local authority must maintain a register of children. This didn't exist before, who are eligible to be registered by the authority under the section. The thing about eligibility is to do with like how old they are. Oh, sorry, I'm jumping ahead there. It's like, so how old they are. Yeah, how old they are. What are some of the others? Can any of you remember which are the other eligibility criteria? Or if they've been in a school, I think it's things like that. So basically, if your child wasn't yet compulsory school age and they suddenly got to that age come September, within 15 days you would have to they would be eligible to be registered. Okay. If you're like me and you move to this country with children who are home educated, within 15 days I would have needed to have made the local authority, registered them with the local authority. Okay, so what is on these registers? What do they want to have on them? They want name and address. They want to know where the education takes place, a description. What kind of education is it? Where is it? All locations, even if it's virtual, they want the like web address or whatever of that. They want to know how much time is the child involved supervising. So this I'm going to come back to this because this is something parents will be required to provide. They want to know the child's protected characteristics. Do they have an EHCP, special needs, or in Wales, an individual development plan? Are they under Section 47 investigation? Is there historic social service involvement, or were they ever a child in need? All of that. What schools did they attend? Have they had any previous school attendance orders? And then they also want any other information about the child's characteristics, circumstances, needs, or interactions with the local authority or educational institutions. And then at the end, they say the register may also contain any other information the local authority considers appropriate. So here you have basically a blank check to a local authority to ask whatever they want. And then they can say, oh, but the law says we can ask for this because we think it's appropriate. And that means it will come down to the individual officers. And if they've got any bias or prejudice or a preconceived idea of what education should look like, if they think your child needs to be looking like at the desk all day, then they may ask, well, where's your child's desk and where do they sit and do they have these workbooks? And they may ask that kind of thing. So you can see that this is quite problematic content. They ask, one of the points I've made is that there's no other category of people in the UK, or I should say, no other category of law-abiding citizens, people who are obeying the law, who have to provide information like this amount of information.
Even though it's not obeying the law, that's more information than other registers require on those individuals. It's more than the illegal people on registers need to provide.
Yes, I think going back to that one, Michelle also said, yeah, I think also if you change that one about who's eligible to be on the register, if you move to local authorities, anything like that, the moment you go into an area and you're home educated, you would need to notify the local authority. Just going back to that. Thank you, Michelle. So you can see how this is quite, to me, I find it quite stigmatizing and discriminatory. Okay, then 4360 is now who provides the information. So parents, this section is for the parents. What information must the parents provide? They need to tell the local authority when the child becomes eligible within 15 days. So that thing I said, like if they become compulsory school age or they move into a local authority. They must provide the local authority with any of the information. So that, remember I said that bit of the information that they're going to ask for. And but they have to give you a minimum of 15 days notice. If so, say for instance, that at the moment your local authority will ask for more information about your education, and they can't expect it within like less than 15 days. And this is the same principle. But basically all of that information, where your child, if they're attending home education groups, if they're going to a tutor, if they are anywhere education is taking place, you need to provide them with that information. You also need to inform the local authority of a change to any of the information. So if something, and you've got 15 days within knowing of that, about knowing that change, and also inform the child if the LA, if the child ceases to be eligible. So when they age out or go back to school or whatever, you need to tell them, which that's understandable. But it's this one that's a problem. Yeah. And yeah, this one can be a problem if you've got a lot of change happening in your life, if things are switching up all the time. Then 436E is also about provision of information, but this one is for education providers. What information do they want? Education providers. Now remember, if you provided information to your local authority about out of school activities, you would have, part of that is you have to give the name and address of these businesses or companies, swimming school, horse riding, forest school, whatever. You'd have to give them the name and address. Now they want to be able to go to these education providers, and they are particularly concerned with if they more than a prescribed amount of time without any parent of the child being actively involved. So we think that they probably will decide later on what the prescribed amount is. So they might say if the child is there for longer than 2 hours, you have to tell us about it. If it's under 2 hours, you don't. We don't know yet. It can be any kind of a program, course of education, or any kind of structured education. And they may ask the provider to confirm what they're providing, their provision, to any child within the previous 3-month period. So they can ask that person, please tell us any child you've had with you, learning with you in the last 3 months. And that's basically data sharing without consent, and virtually no threshold at all, if I'm honest, for that. They want the information about children, the name of the child, date of birth, address, which I spelled wrongly there, sorry, amount of time providing education, and amount of time without the parent actively involved. They have 15 days to respond to a notice from the local authority if they get one. And if they fail to comply, they may receive a monetary penalty as per Schedule 31A. So they could get fined for not providing that information. So I just want to checking the chat. Yes, Ruth, indeed, we don't, this is what they've got to clarify, is whether what information and change of details and that kind of thing. You know, obviously we can't change till a local authority every time we have a new book, but I can see that hopefully that would be cleared up a little bit. Okay, then we get 436F. What can they do with that information in the register? The use of it. They say they can share it for the purposes of promoting or safeguarding the educational welfare of the child to whom the information relates or any other person under the age of 18. Very broad. Promoting the educational welfare of a child is a very different matter than protecting a child from that's at risk of harm. Very different matter. And these are some of the people the local authority may provide information to. So a person listed in section, like this, the Children's Act, blah, 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 arrangements to safeguard and promote welfare. So I'm assuming that would be a person that is involved for social services, that kind of thing. That's my assumption. Michelle might know more about this than me. They can share information with Ofsted, His Majesty's Chief Inspector of Education and Training in Wales, the Welsh ministers, and other local authorities. So I'm not going into a lot of information about this, but it's just that there's a lot more people can ask for information about our children than what it used to be in this under this bill. And then we have 436G, which is the section on support. And for those of you who haven't read the bill yet, this is what we say about the support. It's a little bit of a joke. It says the local authority must provide support to the parent by securing the provision of advice and information relating to the education of the child. But the advice and information to be provided is whatever the local authority considers fit. So you can see by that it's basically they can decide, well, actually, we don't want to give you any information. You're certainly not going to get exams covered as by way of support or get a grant or get help to if your child has like any support for special needs or anything like that.
I think, Juliet, just say that to a lot of people in government, in the civil service, support means you're not a capable person, therefore you need us to help you do the job.
And if you think about it, securing the provision of advice and information relating to the education of the child, where do most of us get our advice and information relating to the education of our children? Where do we get the most solid advice, helpful advice? For most of us, I don't think it's our local authority. I think it's from our home education groups. Okay, so and we get much better information from other parents who've been through the same thing as us than someone who's got no experience in home education whatsoever. So this is why I find this section just laughable, and it is like probably the shortest section in the whole part of the bill. Okay, so what do we have next? 436A, we come to the preliminary notice for school attendance order. This is similar to the notice to satisfy that has been what we've had up to now. You can get a preliminary notice if the child is not receiving suitable education. If Section 47 inquiries in respect to the Children Act 1989 are being conducted. If action is being taken to safeguard or promote the child's welfare where the child is at risk of significant harm. So, you know, basically if they deem your child to be in an unsafe situation, they can issue you this preliminary notice. They can also issue one if they think it's in the child's best interest. So, I mean, who decides that? And they can also give it to you if you have not given them all that information that we spoke about earlier, the information they want from parents, or if you've provided incorrect information, they can also issue you with this preliminary notice. And then you have to satisfy them on the basis of this notice that your child is receiving a suitable education and so on. But if you don't satisfy them, we're moving on to 436I, school attendance orders. What happens there? The preliminary notice would already have been served, but the child's parent has failed to satisfy local authority that they're receiving suitable education, or to satisfy them that it is in the best interest of the child to receive education at home, let's put it that way, rather than otherwise than by regular attendance at school. But it can also be issued if, in the opinion of the authority, it is expedient that the child should attend school. And let's go on here because it doesn't stop there. This bit here, I've just put it here because if the outcome of Section 47 inquiries is that it doesn't proceed, it doesn't go any further, then they don't need to issue a school if it was on the basis of that. If I understand it correctly. So say, for instance, the school attendance order was because there was a Section 47 inquiry underway. If that didn't go any further and it didn't advance, then the school attendance order wouldn't really be applicable anymore in that case, if it was based on that. But under this section, in respect of the child, the local authority, this is part of school attendance orders, must consider all of the settings where the child is being educated and where the child lives. Must consider how the child is being educated, what the child is learning so far as is relevant. So they've got to look at what the child is learning, and they may request over here to allow the local authority to visit the child inside any of the homes in which the child lives. The problem I have with this in particular is if you've got a local authority who has prejudice towards specific kinds of people, or areas of town that are maybe not the greatest areas of town, or if your house is a bit messy, that could all mean you're letting somebody into your home and you're being judged by somebody who may not actually be best placed to judge. But if you refuse to comply with a home visit, it could be considered a relevant factor. So it's not like they'll say you have a choice, but you don't really have a choice, because they may then consider that as like a black mark against you, that you didn't agree. So then you get, once the school attendance order has been issued, if you fail to comply with the school attendance order and send your child to school, you could be found guilty of an offense. You could be sentenced to prison or a fine, and your maximum term under this bit here is up to 6 months. But if the offense is committed after that time, 51 weeks. I don't know what this bit is at all about the Criminal Justice Act 2003, because we're way off from 2003, but it's in the bill. So unless I got the date
like
wrong.
how they've introduced the recent Wales bit, they just acted something that's dormant. So it's quite normal for legislation to sometimes be put in place in case they want to use it, and just keep it there so that they don't have to go through this whole bill scrutiny bit at a time that's inconvenient for them.
Thanks for clarifying that, Michelle. So you can see that you can, basically, the way I see it is that the only incentive, so the support is not an incentive to engage with the local authority. The only incentive is that you don't go to jail. So that's nice of them anyway. Okay, so that was all the long, very drawn out, boring bits. And I'm sorry, guys, but that they make it's really hard to chew through that kind of legal conversation, but it is very, very necessary, because it will affect everybody. It will affect every home educator in this country. So Michelle's also, Ruth is talking about also, yes, the local authority may have a preconceived idea about what education should look like, and then kind of pressurize you into having school at home. I've seen some local authorities are already sending, asking for things they shouldn't, or prescribing to parents how they should be educating. There was one that gave a great detailed explanation. Somebody shared this on one of the groups, and they said, oh, you should do this every day, and maybe you should do this once a week and have a sit down time and have this and that. It's not their role to tell you how to do it, but yet that's what they will take from. And this bill, unfortunately, gives much more of a license for that kind of thing. So the other thing that's important to know about this bill is that there are accompanying documents that also inform how it will be applied and how it will be implemented. If you go onto the bill page here, you'll see there's a whole list of documents here. And all of these things have bearing, and all of these things, as long and as dull as they are to read, we need to read them because they will impact us. So Randall's going to maybe just give us a little bit of a mention to what we can find inside this human rights memorandum, because it is quite chilling.
Thank you, Juliet. Just let me get to share the screen. I think Michelle's already put you in the link.
Michelle has put the link in for that document directly, yes.
Okay. I think you can see that now.
Yes,
This
we can
is
see it.
a PDF document. It's the one that Michelle's given you the link to. It's the European Convention of Human Rights Memorandum revised in order to go into the House of Lords. I want to skip down to one section. This is on page 37 out of 72. You have a bit of reading to do. You don't read the other bits if you're not interested in them. And this is a section that's now clause 30 to 35 that Juliet's been telling you about. If you don't fancy wading through the bill, some of this information will tell you what they're about in a much more readable format, but that's not its point. But I want to skip down here to this paragraph 171, which is the first one that mentions a court case in Germany, about Germany, a home educating family in Germany, 2006, went to the European Court and lost. And the Department of Education is putting an awful lot on this bill, on this outcome of this case. I'll skip down in my menu here to paragraph 183. And importantly, it says there is no consensus amongst contracting states in relation to compulsory attendance at school. So the European Court of Human Rights has accepted this as falling within the state's margin of appreciation. What does that mean, that phrase, margin of appreciation? There is no directive from the European Court or the Convention that a child has to attend school, or there is no directive that it can be educated out of schools. So each state can make up its own mind. In Germany, they've had a long history that basically their basic law, their constitution says it's a parent's responsibility to ensure the child is educated, but it is the state's job to supervise them. Here we do not have that clause. In this country, it is the parent's duty to provide an education, and as I'm sure you know, either in school or otherwise. And in 1944, about 3 months before D-Day, they were debating that clause in the Houses of Parliament, and several members wanted to take out the phrase "or otherwise." And the Undersecretary for Education at the time, a guy called John Eade, E-D-E, argued that they shouldn't take out "or otherwise," or else what has been happening on the continent, aka known in Germany under Hitler, would happen here. So that clause was kept in there on a real purpose. But here we have the Department of Education saying, well, Germany does it, so we can do it. What are they saying they can do? They're saying that in this bit here, the court in this case rejected the claim that Articles 8 and 9 of the Convention and A2P1 were breached by banning home education. So from that, mistakenly, I believe, but this tells you what the Department for Education is wanting to achieve. It says, A, the state has a role in ensuring children are educated and ensuring pluralism in education, which is key to a democratic society. B, the child's right to an education takes place over respect for parental, religious, and philosophical convictions if the two are incompatible.
That was takes priority. I think you said
Yeah, it takes priority. Yep, sorry. The state can insist on compulsory education in school, and that the aims of ensuring acquisition of knowledge and the integration of minorities into society are legitimate justifications for insisting on this and are within the country's own margin of appreciation. And then they get going back to be the ability of parents to educate their children after school and at weekends in conformity with their religious, they don't say philosophical convictions, was sufficient to establish that their rights were not restricted in a disproportionate manner. So basically, behind this bill, if you only read the bill, you will not know this. But the intention of the Department for Education is to say that compulsory education in school is a legitimate aim of the British government. And this is really what we've got to be aware of. This is what they want to achieve. And it's no good Bridget Phillipson and others saying, home educating parents have nothing to fear from this bill. She obviously hasn't read this document. So you might be in good or bad company, however you want it. But basically, she hasn't read it, because this says home education can be restricted simply because the government decides it wants to. And this is behind it. Now, this is aimed at people who, well, I find it interesting. You see, it says in the middle of C, and of integrating minorities into society. We've had a historic situation here where, in this country, where integrating minorities into society is meant to respect those minorities and let them continue their culture. This is actually arguing we can stamp out that culture, we can make everybody conform. So that's just one example. That is, for me, the prime example. It's the one I think which actually, now it's in black and white. I've known about it for a while, but it's now in black and white in this very clear way. It is one that we should all be concerned about. And it is one that actually, if they get away with it in this bill, and I'm hopeful they won't, but if they get away with it, it will change the whole of the education system in this country, because school education will become compulsory. I think that's enough from me.
Thank you, Randall, for sharing that, because that kind of really, I think the problem with this bill is that, you know, you can look at it and they keep saying to us, oh, you know, most home educators, you don't have anything to worry about, nothing's going to change. But there are some people for whom philosophically they have an issue with home education. They have an issue with someone who doesn't agree with them, who does independent thinking. And it's what, in the wrong hands, what can be done with this if it becomes law. So, you know, we do get lots of reassurances from politicians, but if something is in law, it means it can be enacted. So what I'd like to ask now is, does anyone have any questions? Does anybody, how many of you feel like you've learnt something? I mean, if you use your reactions on the Zoom, if you're able to use your reactions, how many of you learned something this evening that you didn't know about the bill before? So you can just put like a thumbs up, or you know, just to you can use, they've got these little reactions at the bottom of the Zoom. Might not be so easy if you're on your phone, because I've got a couple of people that learned something that they didn't know before. Thank you. We've got a little thumbs up in the comments as well. Yeah. So okay, so Kate says she's happier now with asking difficult questions to of her MP. And I think this is the thing, is that a lot of these MPs have not read the bill, and there are people that say, you know, you mustn't scaremonger. It's not that bad. But when you look at it and you break it down and you look at exactly what they're asking, that is unprecedented in this country. It's really quite, there is good reason to be worried about this bill. It's not a knee-jerk reaction. Yes, there are some people who make videos that are very scaremongery and they sometimes say things that are inaccurate. I tend to not, when people post videos, want to post videos in the action group, I will preview them. And if there's inaccurate information, or if like some of them will say, oh, you won't be able to home educate automatically anymore. That's not true. You will, unless you've got a child in a special school or under one of those two categories under Section 47. Do I agree with it? No, I don't agree with it. But to say that nobody will be able to home educate without asking permission, that's also not accurate. So we do need to, I believe knowledge is power. We do need to know what the bill says and understand it, because there's some things that some politicians, if you spelled it out to them in terms of your life story or how it would impact you, how it would impact people you know, they would realize, wait a minute, this is going too far. So Michelle, I just wondered if you've got anything to add as well. And we're happy to have questions in the chat, please, if you've got some.
Yeah, please, while Michelle's trying to find a
microphone.
Put any questions in the chat if you don't want to speak.
Yeah, no, I'm used to getting loads of questions, but we haven't really had many. So either everyone knows everything already, or people aren't wanting to sort of ask when they've got us here to answer.
Well, we had some people who, in the session who said on the poll they haven't read the bill at all. What I'd be interested to know is it what you expected? Is it better than you expected or worse than you expected? Then we also had people that said, some people that thought the bill is a good thing. I'd be interested to know if they still think it's a good thing after this.
Unfortunately, no, the bill doesn't take into account fear of school and teachers. That's something I know my own son put in his written submission, which was not published, was that there is no factor taken into account of the home educated child's voice. The entire bill is silent on that child's voice and does not factor in if a child has genuine trauma that may be a reason that you're home educating. Unfortunately, the bill doesn't factor that in at this stage.
Yeah, and how can we raise more awareness? So we'll talk a little bit about that. What I wanted to say is that if we look at their reasons now, one of the things the MPs are very fond of saying, I've heard this several times, is like, this bill will ensure that no child ever falls through the cracks. Okay. Now I can say with almost 100% certainty that children will continue to fall through the cracks. Why? Because this bill is targeting people, home educators. It's not targeting the children that have fallen through the cracks. So, their concern is about children missing education, but that is a whole different category. This section is called Children Not in School, but almost all of that information and everything is targeting home educators. It's not targeting children that are not in school for any other reason. And if you were a parent who wanted to have your children at home, you didn't want to tell anybody, you wanted to hide your children, you maybe had bad intentions towards your children, do you think they're going to go and say, oh, la la la, here I am, please register me? They're going to just go underground. They're not going to present themselves. They will just go into more hiding. They will find other ways to lie or deceive.
The other bit is it's the simple basic bits of numbers. If you have a needle in a haystack, you don't make the haystack bigger. They're not adding extra social workers. They're not giving extra money or resources. They're not giving the local authority extra money to be able to help with any of the actual safeguarding resources they've got. But instead, they're going to just make the list longer to start looking at people where there's nothing to see, instead of targeting support to the people who either are asking for it. If you think the SEND deficit 6 billion at the moment, there are many children who've been out of school over 2 years who want a school placement. So rather than target the people who want school, whose children don't want to be at home, they're going after people who are happily home educating, and looking when there is nothing to find, as opposed to targeting where they already know there is issues, and then trying to actually save those who do need that element of safeguarding.
Yeah, and you've got children who have been failed by school horribly, or whether the child was bullied, and you sort of think if the parent, in trying to protect their child, you kind of close up. You don't want to give a lot of information, and that could be seen as a negative thing, and then the child could end up being forced back into a school, which was the very place where they were traumatized in the first place. A lot of parents are very fearful about that.
And I know many have raised the risk of the increase for mental health problems and suicide if they continue with the bill as it is. At the moment, it's just a case we have to get this voice out louder,
Yes.
because those statistics are out there with regards to mental health. And it's certainly, well, part of the reason we're going to be having a big protest on the 18th of May with regards to the bill is that this bill will result in more harm than help to
And
well,
and
not
it's
to home ed children, to children at large, because of that very nature. It is not factoring in PDA, it's not factoring in SEN, it's not factoring in children who are already failed, and it's not providing any support to stop what's already going wrong not continuing to go wrong. It doesn't factor in anything that will actually help.
yeah. And we do have a big problem with raising awareness, as I think, who was it that said that, yeah, the Shelley was saying, how can we raise more awareness? It's incredibly frustrating, because even in my groups that where I'm an admin, so I can share it, because some groups won't share anything political in them, and then the people that are going to be affected by this bill won't know. And I will share in my groups, and then you go on that petition. So there's a petition doing the rounds, and you can go and look on the map to see how many people have signed in your area. And then, it was looking like really low. And now I've been posting in the groups and seen that number go up today, which is really encouraging. But people, a lot of, and also at the moment, Facebook is our only main way of communicating, and a lot of people are not on Facebook regularly, or the algorithms don't push the stuff that we need Facebook to push. Randall, are you trying to say something there?
Yeah, I am just on this raising awareness. We've got to get your voices outside of the home educating communities. This is the main thing you've got to do. I want to say two things. Around the protests, some people made really good efforts to contact their local media. That doesn't stop just because the protests have stopped. You can be doing that all the time. And you don't have to be the best writer. You don't have to be the bravest person to talk to the local media. But if you get your voices there, I've seen, it may not be your story, let me say that, but I've seen stories that have started in local media, then get taken up wider and end up being a main story over something else in the national thing. But if they notice that local media is having more and more about parents saying, this is a bad bill, and here are my fears that what will happen, that will be good. So that's number one, local media. I'm also one for saying, please talk to your local councillors. You may think, why? They've nothing to do with the bill. They have everything to do with the bill, because the local councillors are the ears and the eyes in the locality for their parties. And they often feed things back into central party, into that. But there's another reason as well. There's a question here about one local authority that has got a really good relationship with local home educators for the time being, but we know too many where there's been a change of staff and years of work to help staff to have member staff to have a good attitude just suddenly changes overnight. But unless you educate your local councillors, they don't know what the issues are with their staff. And so there is something there that if you can build up a relationship with your councillors, and I think it was in about 2016, it was certainly before lockdowns, we picked up our local council was behaving badly. We were no children at home ourselves, and the people are having trouble. But we spent 2 years starting with our local councillor, and from a 1 out of 10 guidance, local guidance, they moved to a 9 out of 10. But it was hard work. But we did it not by approaching the staff, but by the local councillor. So there's council elections coming up at the beginning of May. So another thing you can do is, it's not as easy to find your councillor as it is the MP, but if anybody comes to your door of this election, talk to them about home education. Ask them what they think of the bill. They'll look stupid at you, but they will report that back. Say, can I meet your candidate, please, so I can talk to them about this? Use these things. It is your voice that will do more. It's all right saying, well, somebody's from a petition will sign that. We need to sign it because there needs to be the numbers on this thing. But that isn't the end of it. You can write to a Lord, do it, but also remember you need to be getting your voice heard locally.
And I just want to reassure, so Dimple was saying here that, you know, there's some concern the child is happy at school. Will they be forced to send the child to school if this bill is brought in? And no, you will not, unless for some reason, if you got reported to social services and they started a Section 47 inquiry, and that might lead to having a school attendance order. But I think for the most part, I think most people will be fine. Some things, depending on where your local authority is, a lot of people will still be carrying on without too much upset. But the actual problem is what this bill gives a license to, so that if local authorities want to ask for more, they can ask for a lot more than they used to in the past. And if parents stand up to that or don't want to give the information, that you could find yourself in difficulty. And everything about the bill is compulsion. It's compelling parents. So there's no, like, it's not like you're getting anything back for sharing information. It's not like they're giving you financial support or anything to do the activities. It's, you know, they can still be difficult if they want to, because this bill would give them that platform to be difficult.
And some of your bits there, you can write to your MP, you can ask your MP to write to the minister and ask her about why prison is seemed to be an appropriate punishment for this particular crime.
And how does it benefit the child? How is it in the child's best interest to put their parent in prison?
Yeah, you can absolutely do that and get her to have to answer.
Yeah. So what that petition that we've linked to, we would like to make sure that if you haven't seen it yet, please sign it, please share it. That's one thing you can do, because if we can get over 10,000 signatures as a start, we should get loads more, because there are a lot more of us than we think. But if we can at least get 10,000, they start paying attention to it. If we can get 100,000, then they will debate it in Parliament. So we need to really support. I would support any petition that undermines, any action that undermines this bill in any way, because it's just not a very nice bill, and it's badly written. You know, if we look at, you know, they used the case of Sarah Sharif to fertilize the soil for this bill. And if you look at the case of Sarah Sharif, she was already known to services. She was, before she was even born, she was known to social services. She was in family court, I think at least 3 times or something. There was a judge that placed her back with her parents, her father, knowing that there was a history of abuse. So this bill would not have saved her, because everything that should have been in place for her was in place. She was known to services.
She's also in a local authority which already openly admits they've had what they call a home education record for years, which you are automatically added to. So they haven't even hid that. And it's part of their policy to automatically do home visits. So she was in an area that, yes, is acting unlawfully, but she was in an area that already does more than this bill is asking them to do. And it didn't make a blind bit of difference.
Yes, and we see that.
What's the point?
And in particular, the local authority where Sarah Sharif lived in Surrey, there have been several cases where services failed these children. And not just her. There were other cases that you can actually go and look. There've been headlines about it, about Surrey coming under the spotlight for their failure to really act where they needed to act. So
We know there are many harms coming from schools. Unfortunately, they're not willing. That
to
they get
acknowledge it.
worried about the numbers of home education, but whereas in any other business, if everyone ran away from your business, the government's business being a school, you would look at why they're leaving, why they don't want to use their service. For some unknown reason, that's something they don't want to hear. They don't want to listen to. They just are worried about the numbers going up, but they don't want to address a lot of the issues they already know. They've had all the reports. They know about increased suicide rate. They've had all the reports. They know our teens are the most unhappy across, is it across Europe or across the world?
Yeah.
I can't remember now.
Europe.
So consistently, we have the most unhappy teens. They have the reports. They have their own surveys, which in their own family children's commission surveys showed that children were happy with family time, quality of family time, but unhappy with the quality of their school. So they have all of this paperwork. They have all of the teachers struck off for the variety of crimes. They have all of that paperwork, but their focus is on the home educating numbers going up. And so we just have to keep highlighting to all our MPs, getting the House of Lords aware and trying to just build up the crescendo so it gets to the point that even if people have got their hands over the ears, they still cannot shut out the noise that's saying how bad things are getting and that something needs to change.
I also want to ask, I don't want to assume that everyone is familiar with the Are You Listening Now campaign. If you aren't familiar with it, that is our campaign at the moment, Are You Listening Now, where you can use that hashtag. And there is a website there where you can actually go and share. I'm putting the link to the website right now. So you can go and share your children's negative school stories there. So you can, we're collecting stories of children's voices or about their bad experiences in school. We're collecting stories about children's voices. So children, basically anything your children want to say, you can help them fill that in. And then there's also one for people who have been home educated, a home ed alumni page where people can talk about what they're doing now and how home education, benefited them. I mean, there's a lot of concerns with this bill just because we know that generally most home educating parents are doing the right thing for their children. It's a hugely, hugely positive and valid choice to home educate your children. And we shouldn't have to feel like we have to hide. We shouldn't have to feel like worried that somebody's going to judge us or have prejudice towards us or stigmatize us. And unfortunately, despite many conversations with the Department for Education, with the Children's Commissioner, they are dead set on their path. And they are, in my opinion, they are not interested. They are not listening. They don't care. That is my personal view. And so we do have to have a very loud voice to get them to pay attention, for them to realize that actually we're not going to go away and we're going to make things very uncomfortable for them. Are there any
on this thing about safe in school issues and not safe in school? I'm looking for it. It's a big search because I've got a lot in the folder, but one of the government documents basically says a child in school is presumed to be safe.
And we know that that is a lie.
Yeah,
that is a lie.
That is what one of the bills behind this document says. If my search finds it before we finish, I'll put which document it is in the links. But that is the mentality of school, of the government.
And unfortunately, we see them manipulating statistics. So often if you read an article, if it gives statistics about like how many home educated children were found to suffer abuse or whatever, you go and do some more homework on that, go and find out where they got the figures, and you will find often there was maybe a much, much bigger figure for children in school but they won't tell you that figure. They'll only tell you the home educated children. I remember years ago reading an article about like 11% of some number of children that were radicalized. But what they didn't mention is that the other 39% went to school. So they'll say 11% were home educated, but they don't talk about the 39%. They do this kind of thing all the time, where they just they don't give the correct figures, and they manipulate the statistics and the data.
Can I just come in there,
yes, Alison.
Juliet?
Yeah.
Hi, hello everybody.
Alison.
I'm late.
Recovering from surgery, Alison.
Yes, I am. I'm in bed. But I thought it was too important to miss a couple of things.
Yeah.
So on the statistics issue, one of the things that they do frequently, and this is one to really watch out for, is they conflate the numbers of children out of school with the numbers of children who are home educated. So, for example, we've got reports on safeguarding where they say so many children out of school were harmed and therefore home education is dangerous. Things like that. So you really got to watch what the words that they're using, the measly words they're using. Another thing you have to watch for is, for example, like you said, they don't talk about the children who are harmed in school. We know that roughly 200 children a year die by suicide under the age of 19, young people and children. We also know that 50 children a year die at the hands of their parents. That's a massive different statistic, and the vast majority of those 50 children are preschoolers. So they are actually using a sledgehammer to crack a nut that doesn't even exist. It's not even a seed. They're manipulating their statistics to justify what they're doing, and we've said this, haven't we, that they will actually create statistics to justify their policy.
Yeah, I think it is very worrying, but we need to try not to be panicked, and we need to make sure we know exactly what we need to be able to give cold hard facts. It's not enough sometimes to just use anecdotal evidence. We need to try and get more evidence for things. Scrutinize any data, any article. Make sure that if somebody's talking to you about the bill, just if they're asking the wrong questions, you might need to correct them, get them back onto what's it's really about. A lot of this bill is, in my opinion, breaches human rights Article 8, particularly, which is the right to privacy of your life, your family life, your home, and your correspondence. I'll give you one example, and this is a good example if you're wanting to speak to an MP as well, is if, say, for instance, you contract with somebody to provide a service for you. You contract with them, you're paying them. It's a private arrangement between you and that organization or person. Why does the government think they have a right to information about that private contract that you are paying for? It would be a different matter if they were paying for the service and then they want that information. But in my mind, I don't think they have any right to that sort of information. So if I'm using a tutor for my child and I've made a contract, why should that be anything to do with them? They're not paying them. I am.
They don't ask they don't ask questions like, who's your dentist, do they? Everybody just assumes your child.
Where do you buy your groceries? What address is that?
Yeah, exactly.
We need to go and check out that shop and make sure they're selling proper food. They don't do that. No.
One thing I was thinking about earlier as well, about challenging MPs when they come back with responses, looking at that response that came up earlier on the action group, which has a full letter with loads of what I've called lies in it. One of them is many children are safer in school. Okay. My challenge would be, show me the evidence.
Yes.
Don't tell me things and not back it up with numbers. Show me the evidence.
Look, many children are, but many children aren't. It's and is it acceptable to is it okay to have a few casualties in the name of this forcing your system on children?
Well, this best interest test is the one that really gets me at the moment. that the local authority can override in certain circumstances a parent's decision under the bill, a parent's
they
decision
think.
to home educate based on their best interest. Well, who has the best interest of their child, of this any child at heart? Generally the parents. 99.99999% of parents have the best. Some random social worker doesn't know your child.
And I think another big thing, another thing about this is that even though this bill affects us as home educators the most, it's the beginning. It erodes parental rights like across the board. So it means that even parents whose children are going to school right now, and they then change their mind and the child is not happy, it erodes their right. Because if that child has got is at a special needs school, they've got to then ask consent, or there's just there's implications for the rest of society if this is allowed to pass. And this is why we do need to speak to Lords, we do need to speak to MPs, because they need to understand that this is a much bigger thing. And it isn't, I know how incredibly frustrating it is, because I look at the stuff and I do feel sometimes just overwhelmed and helpless to change people's minds because they're so dead set on their path. But we do need, if you imagine a dial on your microwave or your stove, we need to just try, if the dial is all the way here, we need to just try and move it a little bit more in the other direction, and work on keep working on them, keep talking to MPs, keep writing to them, even if you don't hear back from them. Don't stop, because at least if the bill passes, you will know you did everything within your power. But I think we don't want people to be panicking too much, because I don't, there's a lot, if this bill passes, a lot of us will, be fine to home educate. There are a lot of people will be, it just may change the way it looks forever, and the way we report to local authorities, those relationships and everything could change.
There's a question in the chat, Julia.
Would our home ed meetups have to be registers? I think, as you've said, it could go there. We don't know yet. They do have the thing about when the child, if the parent is supervising or present. So it may be that things where the parent is on site might not be, but I don't trust any of it.
But what could come up is if another parent does some activity with a child, is that it's not just the meetup as such, but that parent of that other parent might have to have their name put on the register for that child. So it's a really unthought through thing.
Yes.
So,
yes, exactly. And I think this is, we don't know yet, because they haven't said what the parameters are, have they, at all?
No, but that's the thing, that I don't think they actually know, to be honest.
But if you read the memorandum with the secondary legislation stuff, they do things, everything from, at the moment, until the regulations come in place, museum trips can be in scope, swimming lessons can be in scope. So at the moment, the bill itself captures everything, with the intention that the regulations are going to narrow it. So the reality is, right this second, with no regulations, everything is caught up. But the regulations and guidance will then tell us what's really happening, but we won't know what they are until the bill is already too far to adjust it.
Yeah,
that's the difficulty.
And the problem with that, Michelle, isn't it, that the bill gives them carte blanche to change those regulations whenever they like. So they might say, oh, well, it won't be swimming lessons and it won't be when you have your friend look after it now, but it just takes a change of Secretary of State or a change of opinion or whatever, and they can shove secondary legislation through at the drop of a hat. It doesn't get scrutinised.
Yeah, in the wrong hands, this could go horribly wrong.
Alison, can I say to you on your comment, section 436A wasn't going to apply to home
Oh, I know, precisely, absolutely, 100%. They promised us that 436A, I was furious about 436A when it came in. They promised us that 436A was never going to apply to home educators. 436A is the one that says that the local authority have a duty to locate, as far as possible, children who are missing a suitable education. They said that home educators were never in scope for that. That was not about home educators. That was about children who were not registered in school and or were not registered as home educators or known to be home educating or said they were home educating. And now they use 436A as an excuse to scrutinise the education of home educators.
So that's the problem. When something's vague, you can be told, oh, it doesn't apply to you tomorrow. It might, but you can't stop it applying to you in 6 months' time or 6 years' time.
And they're very fond of saying, of course, this isn't going to affect you. Nothing's going to change. But we've read the law and it will almost definitely change. And we've already seen local authorities change their approach in response to the bill being in Parliament, even though it hasn't been passed yet. They've changed their approach. They're asking for things that they shouldn't. They're trying to tell people how to home educate their children, what they should be doing. So Michelle said, what you can do, if your MP won't listen, you can ask your MP, send your MP questions that you want them to pass on directly to the Secretary of State for Education and ask for a direct answer. So then your MP has to send your question to Bridget Phillipson and get an answer from her.
Yeah. And you send them the question and say, please ask this of the Secretary of State. They pass on your letter. The Secretary of State replies to your MP. They should send you her reply or another minister's reply. It has to come from a minister if your MP sends it to them. If you send it to the Secretary of State, it'll come from a civil servant. But it has to come from a minister if your MP does that. And then you can write back to your MP when you've seen it. So I don't find her answer very helpful. I find this problem and that problem. Please ask her to clarify. And you can do that. But there's something else you can do on this matter of MPs. When we first contacted our MP about home education under the Badman Bill, he told us that for every one letter he receives, he counted 10 people in his constituency who was concerned about the matter. Several years later, he said to me, you're the only one who ever writes to me about this. And I'd been telling people locally to write to him for ages, and they weren't doing it. Get people locally to write, because there's another friend of mine says, MPs can't read, but they can count. And the more members of their constituency who have a grievance over something, the more worried they get about their majorities. So you can do that as well. I'd say both of them really. Do get onto people. Do get onto them. Tell them the horrors of this bill, because they are there. We're not over-egging it. They're horrors that are spelt out, and there are horrors that are not spelt out, but within the remit it come. And get them right into their MPs. Get them meet. Best thing is, if you can get more meetings with your MP, get more people there.
Michael said ring the parliamentary office, and the other thing you can do, if for example you've written to them 3 or 4 times, go on their flipping Twitter account and tweet that they get very embarrassed about things on Twitter.
Yeah, well, I must say I've tried, because I've got Zara Sultana, who a lot of people like her because she's this little firecracker, but more recently she seems more concerned with what's happening in Gaza than what's happening in her own country and with our what her constituents are saying to her. So I think another idea might be to get a group of you together and you all do a little like a letter writing party all together. Just to, if you've got people that you know need a bit more support, bit more encouragement and help, or maybe you write a letter that you can all co-sign together.
Or rock
that
up at a surgery. You can all rock up at a surgery if your MP has surgeries.
If only.
Take a group to a surgery.
That would be nice. That would be nice.
Well, some of them do have.
Yeah, and we're also looking at things like maybe booking a parliamentary trip for some of the kids to go. We're trying to get a booking for that, and maybe doing something as part of that. We've got to get creative, and actually, we're also really open to hearing suggestions from people if they've got ideas for creative campaigning. Michelle is trying to organize a campaign that Randall that can you put the link again for that European human rights thingy in the chat? The link to that document.
Yeah, it's higher up already, but I'll put it
Yes,
in.
but
with-
if somebody came in later, they won't see the previous things.
yeah, I'll
So
put it in
Michelle
now.
is busy trying to organize a protest for Sunday, the 18th of May. So if you are able and you can think about getting into London on the 18th of May, that will be hopefully be something substantial. It won't only be home educators. We're pulling in anyone that's got a grievance with this bill to stand with us, because we just really need to make a big stink. Another thing I wanted to say is that also in May, on the 24th of May, I run a conference for home educators. It'll be in Coventry this year. It's an in-person conference this year as well, properly. And Randall and Michelle, Jen Hodge, Alison, they will all be speaking at this conference. I'll put the link in. And if you think you can make it to Coventry, it's going to be a really good opportunity to hear more, because by that stage, the bill will be probably on its way to committee in the House of Lords. We don't know, but it'll be somewhere around when the House of Lords are more aware of it. So it's a good time for us to come together and also just hear more about it and talk to others and get some ideas. Just yeah. So we will be focusing a lot on the bill at this conference. If you guys want to book for that. Is any other questions? Yes, Randall.
I put a post on the action group. If people are on there, I can try and put the link in here in a second, where people can submit suggested amendments for the bill that the group
of peers
are wanting. I'll get the link. I'll put it in.
Can you give a description of what you mean by amendments? What's the kind of thing you're looking for?
Well, just a second. There's three things really. We look amendment to what I needed in the House of Lords for MPs to be able to speak in the committee stage.
In the Lords.
In the House of Lords, in the committee stage, an MP or somebody needs to move an amendment that then can be debated.
Not an MP. Not an
you mean a Lord?
No, a peer. Sorry.
That's what I meant. Yeah.
Yeah, it's late. I'm getting tired. Right.
Oh, sorry.
Now, there's three types of. I've identified on this page, which I'll put in a minute. I've three types of amendments. One is a serious one which will be a real stinging change in the bill. In the House of Commons, I thought one that came up to that was when Fiona Nicholson's MP, whose name I can't remember, but she's been in the news for other things recently, tabled an amendment to put the definition of education which is suitable to the child into one of the clauses of the bill, to make the point that the EFE, like they've changed downroad graded serious harm to harm, they've changed it from an educational which is suitable to the child to a suitable education. And that amendment put it back. And that was a serious one that would have, if it had been in there, it would have made a lot of difference. There's ones that will not get in, but they do enable an MP to speak about something. So somebody could table an amendment like home educating groups are excluded from those having to register. Now that will get a debate on that. But these peers are also looking for unique ones because they want to slow this bill down as much as possible. And they're using it with same tactics, other things, but they have to have unique amendments, ones that can't be grouped with others. Because if three people put in something about local authorities have to have an ombudsman in case somebody's thing, all those will get debated at once, and that'll be a 15-minute allowance for that thing, for that amendment. But if they have ones that can't be done and they table them, then they get their own 15 minutes. So it will lengthen out the whole process. So they're asking for those as well. They're asking for different types of amendments. And this is just a place. I didn't want to get bombarded with emails. What I wanted was a place where people could come up with some out-of-the-box thinking, some inspirational thinking, and see if they can come up with it. So I created this website, launched it. It's only a temporary one. It's called the Amend the CWS Bill. I've just put the thing in there. It's fairly easy to use, I hope. Each clause has got its own page, and some big clauses have got 2 or 3 pages. Just find the right page and put your amendment there.
Okay. Also, in terms of other sort of actions, we've got that if people want something that they can do, there are things like the anthology. Michelle, if you want to mention that as well, which is
yeah. So there's a book that is being the boys are getting them out to members of the House of
hold it
Lords,
a
getting
little
them out
closer to your camera. Then it's called Hidden Voices.
Right. Yeah. So Addison was at the rally on the 8th of March. And he decided he wanted people to actually listen, and he's very frustrated. He's a 12-year-old who's very frustrated that no one's listening, and came up with an idea for how to get this together with some other home-educated children. And then him and Ben, who's a 14-year-old, so he's 12 or 14-year-old, started pulling together a book. And the book contains home-educated children's stories, their parents' stories. It contains some entries from different experts. And then over half of the book is some of the unpublished submissions from the committee stage. So it's pulling together lots of different voices into one space to try and have another way of fighting back against this bill and giving the real story of what it's like to be home educated, but also then giving a load of professionals. So if someone doesn't want to listen to the lived experience of children and parents who are living it, there are some researchers in there and lots of papers they can follow up on to give them somewhere to go. And then there's what people submitted to the committee, which currently is not available because they never bothered publishing all of the submissions.
Yeah.
We found 26 of them. We know there are many more, but 26 is better than none to get in front of them. It's available on Amazon.
So the link is in the chat. So if you want to
Fantastic.
order that, and if you want to order it to give to your MP or a Lord or something, that would be great too. So there are lots of things. And as you can see, with these children coming up with a book, people are becoming really creative or in different ways of how to push back against the narrative around home education. So if you've got any ideas, if you want to run it past any of, by any of us to get some support, we'd be happy to hear you out and see how we can just give you that support on the on the action group and so on. And then just keep looking for actions that you can get involved in. What are other people doing that you can get involved in? If you've got special skills that could be put to work, let us know. Like if you're good at writing, if you have contacts in media, anything like that would be extremely helpful. If you're good at doing research, understanding statistics, those things are extremely useful. Even if you were doing things like freedom of information requests, that would be extremely useful. So don't be shy. If you think there's something you can do to help, please do. But also, I don't want you to go away feeling fearful and horrified. You do need to know this is serious business and we need to keep pushing. But also home education should be a wonderful, joyous experience. And we want you to be joyful about it and let everybody see how amazing it is too. It's certainly not, you don't home educate well if you're living in fear. So don't let that dominate your life at all. Thanks for joining us. We've appreciated your time and I hope that was helpful. And thank you to Michelle and to Randall and Alison for their support with running this tonight.